Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Becoming Anchored podcast. My name is Laura Deneen, and I am so glad that you're here. Lauren Jackson is not with us today, but we do have a lovely, lovely guest, Emily Pardy. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. When I was thinking about the people that I wanted to have on this podcast, you were one of the first people that came to mind. And so I'm just super grateful. I know that your time is so valuable. Emily will tell you all more about herself, but she is a mom to 4 girls, and she also runs a group practice amongst many other business endeavors. So super grateful for your time today. And I'm really glad that you guys are listening today, as I think this topic will pertain to a lot of you and where you have been or maybe where you are going in your journeys. So if you're new to the Becoming Anchored podcast, we really are just here to ride the waves of life with you all. We're here to talk about the pain, the sorrow, the grief, the joy, all of it. And through that, we're first and foremost humans on this show. But we do have the wonderful benefit of sitting with clients day in and day out. And so this work is such sacred work for both Emily and myself. And we love sitting with clients, and we love that part of our work. So Emily is a therapist as well. So that's really what the Becoming Anchored podcast is about. So just to share about our real life lived experiences first and foremost, and then to offer some of our wisdom that we have gleaned over the years as therapists. So if you are local to Tennessee, reach out to Anchored Counseling Co. or Emily's practice, Ready Nest Counseling. Cannot recommend her enough to you all as well. And I'll let her share a little bit more about the work that she does. But if you're local, please reach out to us. If not, please find someone local in your area, as this is not therapy. So I'm super excited to dive in today. We are going to be talking about a super important topic, one that I think is not talked about enough, but it's body image during the postpartum era, if you will. And I think this can apply really for any human, as we all have a body, but we're going to be talking specifically about body image in the postpartum era. So Emily, I would love to hear a little bit more about the work that you do and really your expertise on this topic.
Thank you so much. I'm really, really blessed to be here today. And I'm so grateful for your friendship and our just as a professional colleague, recommending people. We've definitely swapped clients, referrals, both directions. So I appreciate that. And so I founded Ready Nest Counseling almost 8 years ago now, which is crazy. And, we specialize in perinatal mental health, which is a fancy way of saying pregnancy, postpartum, infertility, loss, and early parenting. And it really was one of those things that I needed, and it wasn't around, when I became a mother. As you mentioned, I am a mother of 4 girls. And so now they are really my why I think I want to change the landscape of how we talk about maternal mental health, how motherhood changes you. And of course, our bodies are with us through it all, right? And I think it's, pregnancy and postpartum is one of those really wild seasons that it happens to you. And it's one of the first major milestones where you really have no control over how that's going to be. You can have ideas and expectations, but the reality of how it feels for you in your own skin is very unique to every person. And I think that, we're doing a little bit better job of just being able to talk about these things, but I think there's still a lot of stigma and taboo around how it should feel and what it should look like, as opposed to the actual lived experiences that so many women are living out, and couples are living out in isolation, really, because their feelings don't match those shoulds, right? And they don't know who to turn to, where to bring that. And so myself and our wonderful counselors here have the privilege of holding space for that in those unique windows, that those milestones while thrilling and even when they go well, are extremely stressful and changes your life forever. And often comes with detours or bumps along the way, right? So we are here for all of that. And I think it's just been a privilege and a gift to be able to watch people journey through that and all the different milestones that come with that season of life.
Absolutely. Gosh, and there's like 10 different things that you said that I want to pick your brain on today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that word wild really stood out to me because I'm like, yes, I have a little 16-month-old at home, almost 17-month-old now. And it's hard. I've done a lot of therapy around my own birthing experience, my own pregnancy, postpartum, all of it. And it's really hard to put words to that. But yeah, I mean, it is a wild ride. And that stigma that you mentioned as well, that piece stood out to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, like, what do you see in your practice that maybe is perpetuating stigma? You mentioned that word should. Like, what are clients coming to you with that maybe you're working on debunking with them?
Yeah. It's interesting because while postpartum body images is, everyone can kind of relate to that, like, oh, getting back to a certain idea of who you feel like you are in your own body, your own skin, of course. But I think that journey, that's kind of the landing zone of what starts way, way back. And I would say, and even raising girls now, back in the puberty era where you first get your period, you can't really talk too much about that. We're getting a little bit better about that now. But I think what I see is the expectations start then, right? Our ideas of motherhood, of the capability of getting pregnant, of the fears and hopes around that whole idea and life phase, we start shaping that then. And if we aren't able to talk about infertility or just the differences, the illnesses that can inflict on people, or the toll it takes on your career or your relationships, then women are finding themselves really lost in their 20s, 30s, and older, feeling like nobody told me I had to choose between a career and a family, right? Nobody told me I had to take paid time off to be able to go to my IVF clinic, or go get, it's like all these avenues that are actually very, very common now. We didn't set any tracks down for that route early in our conceptualization of what it would look like to become a mother. So I think that, we're, again, we're getting a little bit better about this, but when we start with informing and educating girls that, like, you have a 28-day period and this is when you ovulate and this is the end, like, if they even get that much information, then anything outside of that is like, well, I guess I'm the problem. I guess my body doesn't work that way, right? Which is actually the majority of women are off a little bit or a little longer, a little short, all these things. So the story of like what I should be doing and what should go in a certain direction, then is really challenging to wrap your head around when that time comes and you're like, okay, I'm ready to be pregnant. And it's like everybody I know, by the time you hit that point, you're ready to be pregnant yesterday. Like, you want it. And then you realize, I don't really know how this works, maybe. And some of us get lucky and we, are able to conceive easily and have healthy pregnancies that are uneventful, which is awesome. But many, many are not. And I think when we've called that the norm, and that's not your story, and it actually isn't the norm, then you feel like it's a you problem, right? And so that's what I see in a lot of clients, is this kind of unraveling of like, oh, this goes actually way back into your beliefs about who you are and how you felt about yourself way before you met this new child in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to kind of piggyback off on what you're saying, Yeah, I mean, those expectations are something, especially that are placed on our bodies, right? We're talking about body image today, postpartum. Those
Right.
expectations are something that we are talking to clients about really on a daily basis in my practice, and looking at
Yeah.
where those expectations come from. Is that self-imposed? Is it imposed? Well, we live in a problematic culture, right? So I would argue that everyone lives in
Right.
this
Right.
diet culture. And so some of it is imposed by other people, but really looking at where
Definitely.
those expectations that you're putting on your body to look a certain way are coming from. Is that helping your mental health? Is it harming you? And then, yeah, the should piece, like there's something wrong with my body, I think is really the narrative that we see oftentimes in our practice as well. And I think the postpartum kind of time can be especially vulnerable
Hmm.
for
Yep.
women, and that process of that internalized shame oftentimes shows up of like, there's something wrong with me, or whatever it might be. And you're right, typically it is linked
Yeah.
to earlier messages in our formative years. So when I say that word formative, for those of you that are listening, that's that kind of childhood, adolescent, when our brains are really growing and building neural pathways. That can just be really helpful to unpack in the therapy space, is like, hey, where does this expectation that you're putting on yourself come from? And so I hear
Right.
you saying that as well. Yeah. What do you think, in your opinion? I certainly have some thoughts, and I'm not the expert that you are, but around what makes that postpartum kind of time especially vulnerable to
Hmm.
for women experiencing negative body image. What do you think it is about that time that is
Yeah.
so vulnerable for people?
Oh yeah, it's so multifaceted. It's I'm certified in perinatal mental health. So when we talk about like perinatal mood disorders, we're talking about postpartum depression, of course, it's kind of the popular one, but also postpartum anxiety, postpartum OCD. And even before any of that, there is the very typical, like we're talking 80 to 100%, because we think it's like pretty much everyone has baby blues, right? That right after you give birth, your hormones are regulating. Like it is not unusual or inappropriate at all to be overly emotional or crying a lot, or it kind of runs the spectrum. And as long as it isn't harmful to yourself or someone else, it's pretty normal, right? So it is okay, and that usually regulates. And I think that we have to be able to give some air for that, that I think that it starts right away, that if I'm crying but I'm looking at my baby, I'm doing it wrong, right? That I'm like, oh no. There's a lot of fear in our culture about like, well, does that mean I'm not bonding? Okay, what if I choose to breastfeed or not? And there's a lot of shame around not being able to produce enough milk for your baby. I think the whole breastfeeding piece just is difficult. I think there's a huge struggle in feeding. I don't think there's enough lactation support that's offered or encouraged. And then also, if you don't choose to breastfeed, it's still challenging. Like you're still having to feed the baby and make bottles and keep up with all that. Like there's no easy route here. But I think that because of that link to your own body in postpartum, like we are biologically designed to feel viscerally reactive when our baby cries, right? It's like the cave woman lizard brain part of us doesn't know the difference between hungry baby, that's fine, and no, and the bottle is warming up and they're crying and it's going to be a minute, or baby getting eaten by a tiger, right? And so
Yeah.
our bodies react to that, and so we already struggle with that kind of like internal external conflict of those mixed messages, right? So that's just on a like fundamental level. And then we put ourselves in a context where apparently some people can have a flat stomach in 4 weeks after a baby, right? It's like, and we've been shown, and again and again and again, wow, look what was attainable for this human.
Yeah.
And it's not wrong until we make that the expectation for all humans, right? That it's like, oh, if she looks like that, good for her. But she alone in her body who was able to, and we make it something that's like she achieved that, right? And it's like, well, that actually we're meriting something that doesn't necessarily like need acknowledgement. Like
Yeah.
maybe she's struggling. Is she okay?
Yeah.
Or that's
Like
just
the
how her body
assumptions.
reacted, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's something that we talk a lot to clients about in the practice as well, is really this piece around like, hey, we can't tell if someone is okay by looking at them. And that's part of that diet
That's
culture
right.
piece, right? So I love what you said of like, hey, yeah, somebody their body may change a lot in pregnancy and someone else may not. And I think at the end of the
Right.
day, it's really important to focus with clients on how are you taking care of your body. And really, like you talked about, right, like this kind of primal response to some of these hormonal changes and vulnerabilities. Through that, how are you taking care of your body, right? Like, are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting enough rest? Are you nourishing yourself
Right.
well enough? Are you getting adequate nutrition? Because that's also such a vulnerable time for our bodies
Yeah.
when they're trying to repair and there's blood loss and all these other things that are going into it. And so one thing that we like to do at Anchored is really shifting from like, what does my body look like to, hey, can we care for our bodies? And hopefully this is beyond just postpartum,
Absolutely.
right? Hopefully it's like we are
Yeah,
working on this always.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I think you're right. It's that vulnerability that, like, we are also fed in our culture that if we're not suffering or sacrificing, we're doing motherhood wrong. And so, right from the get go, we aren't getting enough rest. We are putting the baby first. We aren't eating enough or staying hydrated. It's like we are so focused on this new baby, which is a good thing, but we have to allow for, there's kind of what we call an appropriate imbalance where it's like, okay, now all of our energy is going to be consumed by this new little human. But that means that then there should be an appropriate rebalance, right? That it's like at some point, okay, I am asking for help. I am making sure I'm getting sleep. Someone else can help with the baby, And so we really want to teach new parents to kind of help each other recalibrate that, and to be able to find the support they need, if that is feeding support or if it is an overnight nurse or if it is asking for help from your friends or family. And I think that we haven't enabled the asking for help mechanism enough in humans. We're a very individual society. And I think that, truly, when we say like it takes a village, like it really does. And so like get your village and find that community that can actually not just show up for you, but like encourage you to reach out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love what you're talking about. I read a post the other day just talking about how oftentimes, especially in the postpartum, period, the moms are the ones that are lost. And this might actually have been a post that your practice made now that I'm thinking of it, but it was something along those lines of like what you're talking about, this like recalibration of, yeah, baby is important, of course, and there's this precious new life, and mom's important as well, whether it's her mental health or physical health, and making sure that she has appropriate care, and just all these pieces I think that are really important in the postpartum period. One thing that I'm thinking about my own postpartum journey, I do have quite a few friends who have had babies and had babies before me, and I was more career focused and then decided to have a child. But I feel like one of the pieces that I wasn't prepared for was the physical pain that I was in postpartum. And there were some things. So I did have a friend who did warn me about the tears. And she was like, hey, Laura, you are going to cry and you're not going to know why. So when that happened, I was like, okay, thank goodness for this friend that told me about that. But I was not prepared for my own recovery and there were times when I slipped into shame or guilt or just anger towards my body. And I really had to work through that and get support from the people that were in my safe community, and my therapist. And I did all the things to be able to work through that. But I think, that's related to body image, because I felt this assumption, like we were talking about, or this expectation that I should be recovering faster. And I'm a doer, you know this, but like it didn't fit in my plan. I'm like, why am I like having to lay in bed and like I can't do the things that I want to be able to do? And so that felt, I don't know, just really enlightening to me, and I think gave me another piece of wisdom as I work with moms that are postpartum. I'm like, okay, I'm going to prep them in this way. And I know I can't prep all the ways, but that was just something that stood out to me.
Yeah, but I think that's a great point, because it feels very defeating, and you just did something amazing. Like you should feel like so proud of yourself and your body, right? So that's where it feels almost backwards, because you can go into the expectation of feeling like empowered and like I am woman, and like it's maternal, and shouldn't that power like kick in and make me feel like I'm on top of the world? And, a lot of times, sometimes the birth story doesn't pan out the way we had hoped. That's its own trauma that is worthy of doing the work. Sometimes, a lot of times we gloss over, like, as long as baby and mom are healthy and okay, that shouldn't matter, quote unquote, and it's like, it absolutely matters. And I've seen many, many women get, just struggle with the trauma of that expectation, or that loss of, it just didn't go the way they planned, or it became very scary and traumatic. And so, if you're out there and you survived a birth, but you are still very perplexed as to why it matters to you, you get hung up on these things, definitely talking through that, because your body keeps the score on that too, right? And it really does matter, especially then in your expectations of how you're healing. And I guarantee you, like everybody's birth story is so different. I've probably heard hundreds of thousands of birth stories by now. And it's like, everyone is unique, right? And it really is remarkable how, one can experience something and another woman can be like, that was not at all my experience, and it could even have the same facts, of like, I pushed for an hour, or I had a C-section or whatever. So, and I just think we're not preparing, as you mentioned, like enough mentally to be able to say like, oh, I actually need my whole body, my spirit, my mind, everything to recover. This is not just my vagina, like this is like inside and out. My whole being has shifted. And so that takes time, and time is an element we very easily dismiss. We're just like, ugh, I don't have time for this. We're a very busy culture. And it's like, no, it literally just will take time for your body to heal. And you have to be able to be open to that, because it can be very frustrating, especially if you are not able to like physically move in the way that you want to. And mentally you can have the need to go outside and have a walk, but maybe that's not what your body is capable of in that moment. And so it can feel very defeating in your own skin, and you're supposed to, feel empowered, and instead you feel left out and kind of behind.
Yeah. And I think what we talk to clients about a lot in our practice, and I'm sure you can relate to this on some level, is some of the grief that is there, right? Whether you're a first-time mom, or some of these expectations or grief around your birth story or infertility, and almost feeling like a distrust in our bodies. And so part of the work that we do here is asking clients how we build that trust back in our bodies. And I think doing the therapy work and reaching out for support, like you're talking about, with people that truly get it, is so pivotal, because it's also countercultural, right? We're sold these messages, back to those messages, that we can't trust our bodies and that we should always be changing, or that we should always be comparing our bodies to, Jane's body or whatever it might be. And I think the postpartum time is a very vulnerable time for all of those things. And so one thing that we're talking to clients about, whether they've just had a baby or not, is really like, hey, how do we help you trust your body, even if maybe we need to work on the trauma of it not showing up for you, or you think that when you gave birth, and how do we rebuild trust in our bodies? And it's so unique for everyone, like you talked about, but I think that can just be such a great question if you're listening today, to ask yourself maybe what takes away from trust in my body, and then what helps me trust my body. So if I'm hungry, giving it food. If I'm thirsty, giving it some water. If I need to go to the bathroom, using the restroom, like asking for help. If I'm overwhelmed, that's like trusting that I can reach out when I'm struggling mentally. So that's one piece that we really love to do work around with clients in our practice, and I'm sure that you do quite extensive work around
We do.
that realm as well.
It's beautiful work. It is beautiful work, and it should, it can be so empowering on the other side of it, right? So if you are feeling defeated, if you are questioning like, oh, this is just me, I feel this way because I'm that way, you are not alone. I built a whole business around it. You are not the only one. And there is through, you can get through this. And I think that a lot of times in the postpartum period, we have never seen our bodies in that state before, right? It's like you have months of becoming larger as your pregnancy, grows. And it's kind of this gradual thing, but then all of a sudden it's done. And it's like,
you birth a baby.
Where's the baby? What is all this skin about? What is all this jiggling about? And many women they've never seen their body look even remotely like that, right? It's not meant to until that happens, right? So it's just very unfamiliar, and it's very weird. It can feel, again, kind of out of control, like it's foreign to you. And so I think we forget too that like we do all live in aging, changing bodies. And so a lot of times women will say like, oh, it's because I had a baby that I don't like my body anymore. Or it's because, it's like this thing, if I wanted to have kids, this was what I had to do, and I get that. And somehow we turn that narrative into like resenting ourselves. I don't know why. It's messy, but we are changing anyway, right? And I try to kind of take them out of that here and now, like this is only because I chose to have children. It's like, no, actually, like, I don't know what your body would look like today, but I know it won't look the same in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. And so I think it's so much deeper than just, okay, I'll accept my postpartum body because it brought my kid into the world.
Sure.
I think you're worthy of accepting your body in its changing, growing state at all stages.
I love this. And I completely agree. And even this, this culture that we live in, like we've talked about today, there is this pressure to stay young and stay looking a certain way. And back to that appearance thing, this is where it can be really helpful for clients to shift back to their value system. So this is from acceptance commitment therapy, for those of you that are listening, if you're familiar with the therapy world. But this is really shifting back to our values instead of our appearance. And also, we don't want to invalidate a client, right? Like you're saying, like, sure, I get that that's what you're coming into therapy with. And are you open to a different perspective or a new perspective, like you talked about, of like, hey, our bodies may look different tomorrow, 10 years from now, et cetera. And how do we embrace that versus this more shame-based response that often shows up for clients, and really shifting that response, I think, to our bodies, especially in the postpartum kind of era, is really helpful.
Yeah, I think in motherhood, we have such a gift too of being able to look at, something I'll say often to new mothers is, look at this new baby. Like, is this baby perfect? And they're like, yes, absolutely. I'm like, yes, we all agree. This creature is adorable and perfect. He or she is absolutely perfect. And then I'll say, does the baby know they're perfect? Is there an awareness of how pure and good and innocent and lovely they are? No, she has no idea. He has no idea, right? The no awareness, just a newborn, helpless. Does that take away any value of how perfect and worthy they are? No. So the reality is we don't have to be aware of how awesome we are, of how worthy we are. We just are, right? And so I think when we separate out, you're talking about your value, that you intrinsically have value and worth, whether you feel like you do or not. And I think that baseline of, okay, I can accept that regardless of how I feel, regardless of how I fit in my jeans or how I look in the mirror today, that, okay, if that's true for my perfect baby, it has to then also be true for me. And that kind of motivation is so much easier for, me, even as a parent, I'll speak for myself, like to grasp and to know, like, okay, like, yes, I will believe that because I can look at my child and know their worth. And sometimes that's an easier sidestep than just in and of myself, I'm worthy, right? And so
Absolutely.
I like to use that motivation that's already built into this new experience of motherhood.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Emily, for your time. I know that we could probably keep talking for minutes or hours. And we acknowledge here today, we're so grateful. Body image is complex. And so we acknowledge that. And there's so much that we did not even touch on today. But if something about this episode spoke to you, please reach out. We would love to hear from you. Before we close, Emily, I would love to hear a little bit more about how clients or people that are in the Nashville area can find you and your practice.
Thank you. Yes. Well, we'll dump all the info in the show notes, but readynestcounseling.com is our website. You can follow us on Instagram at readynestcounseling. We have physical locations in Nashville, Franklin, Knoxville, and Charleston, South Carolina, and are happy to do teletherapy, of course, as well. And you can follow me at my professional account on Instagram at emily.pardy.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And we'll make sure to put those in the show notes. So you all know this if you're listening to the podcast, but if you're new, we do an affirmation and homework each time. We oftentimes give homework at our practice at Anchor, and I'm sure that you all do that as well. We like for clients to have a specific takeaway. So Emily, would you like to close with one or both of those?
Absolutely. So a classic, easy homework I give to new clients, a lot of times busy moms, is just to set a reminder on your phone twice a day, maybe like 10 o'clock and 3 p.m., something like that, that pops up and it just asks, what do I need? And that's it. And it could be anything. It could be water because I've had too much coffee. It could be, I really need to call my friend back. It could be, I haven't had a hot meal, it's like, and it doesn't mean you can meet that need immediately, but it's just taking inventory that we're slowing down, we're checking in and actually worthy of asking ourselves, what do we need?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. That intentional pause, if you will. Yeah. So I will close with the affirmation. So I want to leave you all with this idea that I am capable of taking care of my body, no matter what it looks like. So I want you to think more on what that means for you, but I'm capable of taking care of my body today. Thank you, Emily, for being here on the Becoming Anchored podcast. We will see you all next time. Take care.